And Simon, what's your feeling about your work in theatre as a potential means of changing society and changing the way we think, or is this just essentially, art is for art's sake and we're entertained by it and that's its function?
At the moment, we are unable to perform in a public space. You are unable, I'm unable. We're unable to gather. So we can't make any theatre at the moment. So, of course, the question necessarily occurs, does that matter? Is anybody missing it? Is that problematic? What happens when we gather in a space all together? Are we missing something essential? Well, no, maybe it's just a kind of hobby that we have and we can just carry on and we relate to each other as we're doing here through this screen, through this little camera up here. So it's an interesting moment for interrogation of those things. We can't go to an art gallery either. We can't go to a funeral. We can't go to a wedding. We can't gather in a group to have a large meal together. We can't gather necessarily for a sporting event. But at the same time, we can listen to music through our headphones. We can watch films. We can watch television. So it's a really interesting time to ask the question of, does it matter? And also, what is going on when we do watch these things, or what is going on when we exchange? There was a piece of research done at the University of Chicago where they discovered that 10 minutes into watching a piece of theatre, the audience's hearts started to beat together in unison. I'm sure something similar happens at a live concert. And in fact, probably at many gatherings of people. But one of the things that happens when you are involved in a piece of theatre, and that term can be very large because theatre does not have to happen within a theatre. It can happen on the streets, of course, but it can also happen within the context of a family gathering. A funeral is also a piece of theatre. It is a ritual that we repeat and come back to constantly. And of course, what happens in the theatre when you are together is that you respond, you imagine the same thing at the same time. And in so doing, what happens is you become aware that this thing that we assume, which is so private, our inner world, is no longer only ours, but belongs to everybody else around us. And it gives a lie to this idea of being purely separate individuals. And so there is a real problem when we take that away, because then we start to believe this lie that we are separate, completely separate and separated individuals. And why is that a problem? Well, I think it's a problem when we look out and we see the way that we treat the world. So very simply, the way that we treat nature as a thing to be exploited. Recently, the Tory party, the Conservative, the ruling government of Britain, started to try and evaluate the worth of nature in economic terms. But to value a forest is only to value what it is worth when it is cut down. And so again, it's the idea of a product or something outside of us which is separate from us. But as Jared and our cousin, who is an oceanographer and a world expert on ice and on the oceans and waves, and also the temperature of the oceans, and is monitoring and understanding the terrifying speed at which the oceans are heating up and the destruction that is being wrought all over the planet. His phrase to me was, we are not separate from nature. We are all part of nature, and we cannot escape it, just as we cannot escape the planet. So there is no, as we are sitting here in front of our screens, we are also simultaneously part of nature. And of course, one of the paradoxes of these screens is they manage to join us up. I don't know where the 73 people who are currently watching are situated all over the world. I happen to know because somebody has texted me that one of them is in the Orkney Islands, in a house called Hopedale that Jared will remember. And they're watching us. London, you see, and there's somebody saying where they are. People are saying from all different places. So we are
from
connected,
Finland to New
but we are
York.
nonetheless separate. Now, this notion of separation, we can extend that to the idea of art. The idea that art is separate from who we are is also, for me, a lie. The fact that we can speak to each other is an artistic act. It requires us, all the processes of making art are in the process of speaking. And in fact, music is within it. My tone, you can hear a certain tone. If I speak in another tone, it will be slightly different. The meaning will be different. I'm shaping meaning. And so, although we might think of art as the handbag on our arm, we would be fooled into thinking that, and fooled into it by what you might call the new world order, the world order that has grown up over the last 200 years, in which we need to monetize and see everything for its economic value. In order to do that, we must put it outside of us. We must separate it as something that we can buy and sell. So if it is just a handbag on the arm, then of course it is an object outside of ourselves. But of course, we know that it is not the object outside of itself. We know that it is the arm itself, which is not for sale, because we can't operate without it. And art is the very air we breathe, because it is the thing that makes us, allows us to be able to communicate with each other. And rather than being an escape from reality, it is a means by which we can understand and see reality. And so rather than being in any sense at a remove from us, without it, there is no question that we will perish if we don't understand that it is fundamental to who we are, not an extra, but part of the very essence of what it means to be human. The great mathematician G.H. Hardy said, a mathematician, like a painter or a poet, is a maker of patterns. If the mathematicians are more permanent than those of the artist or the painter or the poet, it is because they are made with ideas. But the same processes which mean that you can create a new form of mathematics are the same processes by which you paint, by which you write poetry, by which you write music. That is to say, it requires an imaginative leap. And Hardy himself says, we only know the truth of mathematics through its beauty. As he said, there is no place in the world for ugly mathematics. Beauty is the first test. And we see that in the beauty of something, like Einstein's E equals mc squared. It's absolutely contained within one single gesture. We see that and so what does art do? What art does is it joins us together. I am speaking to Kirill because Kirill marvelously has absorbed in the most artful and artistic way the English language. And we are therefore able to communicate and to share that. But that exists in the space between us. It doesn't exist in you and it doesn't exist in me. It exists as the thing that you, I, and Jared are sharing together. And the consequence of that is to make us understand that we are all interconnected, just as we are interconnected into the world as a whole. And the great, as John Berger puts it, the opposite of love is not hate, but separation. And so it seems to me that the essential place of art, and yes, it can transform the world, but it is the essential place of art is the fact that it is the thing that joins us and makes us understand how we are joined to everything else.